This is Still Enrolled.
And welcome on into the latest edition of Still Enrolled, a Big Ten football podcast. As always, Ryan Hickey, Ryan Tripp with you here as Tripp. Proud to say we have taken Still Enrolled into the new year. A happy 2025. Glad the pod is still kicking here in the new year. I know you had a good New Year out at the Fiesta Bowl. You're an Ohio State fan. It is a great start to the new year as well. Tripp, man, holy hell, what a day and a half of games we did have here in the Big Ten, huh?
Man, Ohio State to beat Oregon in that fashion, 41-21. Like, I know we both picked Oregon, but to me, it's not a surprising result that Ohio State won the football game. But by the time I got home from our bus trip up from Harrisburg yesterday, I watched the start of the game on my phone. I walk in the door, and it's 14-0 Ohio State. And then it's 17-0 Ohio State. And by the time I put a load of laundry in, it's 34-0 Ohio State. Like, what?
Excuse me? Hold on. Is this right? Are we watching? Is this Oregon down 34-0? Is this? It is.
So of the first three college football playoff games, and everyone knows the national tragedy that happened in New Orleans, and the Sugar Bowl will take place later today as we record this. And I had to look at my calendar. It is Thursday morning. As we record this Thursday morning, and the two games involving Big Ten teams already completed. The team that had played in the opening round of the college football playoffs had a 14-0 lead after the first quarter in each of the three quarterfinal games.
We talked about it right in the last pod going to this game. If it's a risk playing on opening weekend because you could lose, you could get injured, right? Have some key players out. But if you can get through that first weekend with a win and relatively healthy, like we saw both Penn State and Ohio State do, there's real momentum there to start the second round against a team that, in Oregon's case, had a 25-day layoff. And I don't think that's a big part of why they lost. I think Ohio State, you just see how, yes. I'll ask you this, Trev. I mean, like, right now, how well Ohio State's playing, is there, like, if they continue to play this way with how they played against Tennessee and Oregon, there's no team that's beaten them. I'm not even sure there's any team that can keep within 2 touchdowns. They right now are just head and shoulders playing better than it's seemingly any other team right now left in this field.
Yeah, I want to go into this game and talk about a couple of matchups, but the overall complexion of Ohio State first, right? Coming into the season, there was no question that this was the most talented roster in all of college football. And as we know throughout the course of this 2024 season, probably no time greater than this year to really emphasize this point. Games are not decided on hypotheticals and decided on paper. They just aren't. So Ohio State's going through this year, and the 32-31 loss in Eugene against Oregon in an unbelievable environment, it looks like a minor blip on the radar. But after that game, the game in Happy Valley was a defensive game where they put it away late because of their physicality on the defensive line and the offensive line. Well, that's coming just a week after they really struggled at home against a pretty average Nebraska football team. A team that had a lot of hype in Nebraska, but really was a pretty average football team in 2024. And then after that, to have Ohio State end the season against Michigan, and again, for all of this talent, and I get it, defensively, they've been consistent the entire season. They've been, if not the best defense, one of the best defenses in college football for the entire season. But the great surprise about the Ohio State football team is, where is this offense? How, with the offensive minds of Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, Brian Hartline, everyone that's involved in that offensive unit, how are you unable to capitalize? And I recognize that they had problems along the offensive line, which magically, in the time between the Michigan game and the game against Tennessee in the opening round of the college football playoff, have magically just disappeared. They're gone. They're playing out. It all starts there. They're playing outstanding up front, but they're aiding it in finally recognizing that they have by far and away the most talented skill group of any team in the country, and that is their wide receivers. And I get Smith is a freshman, and I think he had some freshman moments throughout the course of the season. But they're allowing Smith, Egbuka, and Tate to just make plays. And the same thing, if you give Judkins and you give Henderson the ball in an offense that has rhythm and balance, they certainly can state a case for the best running back tandem in college football. And there's probably a couple of Big Ten teams right now that we're talking about best running back tandem in college football when you look at what Penn State did to Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. So Ohio State has all of this talent, and I don't know why it took 14 weeks for them to figure out how to make it work on the offensive side. But Ryan Day and Chip Kelly are in a rhythm right now with their quarterback, Will Howard. When you have an explosive offense playing with a defense that's played at an outstanding level all season long, and a defense that has taken that outstanding level in the postseason, their 2 playoff games, and has elevated it further. JTT and Jack Sawyer had a relatively quiet regular season. It was still good. It was still solid, but they weren't game wreckers. Now, in this Oregon game, I thought the game wreckers, and we can talk about scheme here in a minute. I don't want to go off track, but I thought the game wreckers in this game were Ty Hamilton, Tyleik Williams, and Kanu up the middle for Ohio. And that was so pivotal to this game. But then you have Caleb Downs, who's maybe the best defensive, most versatile defensive player in the country at safety, what they have at the cornerback position. But now they're starting to play like elite players too. Yeah, they look unbeatable right now, but every game takes on its own personality. So I'm not crowning the Buckeyes yet. This is a team that lost at home to Michigan. Michigan. Which we'll talk about in a little bit. I'm not ready to crown them yet, but they look really darn good.
That they do. And like you said, there's so much to get into with this game because so much went well. Let's start with the offensive line like you highlighted, Tripp, because you're right. That was the biggest question mark all season long for the Buckeyes. Only became a bigger question mark as injuries started depleting this unit. And obviously after the Michigan game, you see how little push, how dominant they were in the interior. You're thinking, holy hell, like they have no chance. And they, in this game, did a great job protecting Will Howard. 0 sacks allowed against what is a solid, right? Oregon defensive line, who, by the way, Jordan Birch missed the first matchup they had back in October, now healthy for this one. So a good edge presence for the Ducks. Still 0 sacks allowed by Ohio State's offensive line. And they ran the ball, Tripp, for 181 yards, almost 6 yards a carry. And you're looking at the balance they bring. If Ohio State can continue to run the ball at the way they are, just enough of a compliment to just take away all the resources that most defenses should throw at the passing attack, like we just saw against Oregon's defense. Ohio State got anything they wanted offensively in the pass game and the run game, in large part because those 5 guys up front, despite 2 injuries and another player in Jackson playing out of position, going from guard to tackle, they look like one of the best units right now in these 2 games we have seen in all the playoff. I don't know, like I said, I don't know what the hell happened in the 2 weeks between Michigan and Tennessee, but boy, whatever Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, their offensive line coaches, just the players themselves, whatever they read, practiced, took, it's working to perfection. It's been one of the biggest reasons why they look like a team right now with no weaknesses.
Obviously, they've had the run after the catch too, especially Jeremiah Smith, that first touchdown. But a lot of the throws are still Howard going back and having time to make plays to get it to the outside. I think they've done a better job of using a quick passing game, but it's not like they've necessarily just turned to that. And it is that balance that they have on offense. But when you have receivers making plays like Ohio State's receivers made early in that first quarter, then all of a sudden Oregon has to respect that. They have to respect that. And I said it after the Tennessee game. I believe it again in this game. Whether it's the threat of the pass or the actuality of the pass occurring, it is more like the passing game is setting up Ohio State's run game. And then to have the physicality, Judkins runs with such physicality, the explosive ability both he and Henderson have, it's still, while it's been a depleted offensive line, it is still a big physical offensive line. Ohio State recruits big physical linemen. They have the ability just to lean on you too. And when they're getting pushed, and when that pass game is there, and you've got a defense off balanced. And, look at some of the formations you started to see Chip Kelly bring out in that game, where like how they're going to utilize all of the talent that they have. They're keeping a defense guessing right now. I really believe it's Ryan Day and Chip Kelly. Hard to believe that a month ago, we're talking about what is the future of Ryan Day after a performance like that yesterday. They are pushing all of the right buttons offensively. Yeah, the players deserve credit first and foremost, but what they have done to figure out what works for them and how to get this roster to play at this level is absolutely unbelievable. And the guy no one's talking about, because there is all this talent, is Will Howard. He has to play incredibly well to make it work. And he was awesome in that game. 17 of 26, 319, 3 touchdowns, but in just complete command of the offense, even more so than what the stats will indicate.
And you look for Will Howard, like we've talked about before, I think he's a big game quarterback. I give him a lot of credit because, look, everyone wants to point to Michigan not playing well. I get it. Bad game for him, bad game for everybody. But they've now played Ohio State 5 top 10 opponents in the regular season and now in the playoff as well. He has 13 total touchdowns, 3 interceptions. To your point, like sometimes like the Penn State game was ugly, right? And he had 2 key mistakes in that game that allowed the door to be open for Penn State to possibly win it. But to his credit, in an ugly game like that, he's mentally resilient. He battles back, does not allow those early mistakes to ruin the game, and ended up making some big plays to win the game late for Ohio State. In the Oregon game, like the first time, he was great, Tripp. The problem is everyone looks at the one play, the slide with no time left, as like the defining play of Will Howard's game. He was the main reason why they even had a chance to win that game, because the defense was getting toasted. The run game, Judkins did nothing in that game at all. He threw for over 300 yards, played well, did not make any key mistakes for the most part to keep Ohio State in it. Again, he slides a little bit early. We talked about the Jeremiah Smith no pass interference call, etc. His play that game should not be defined for Will Howard based on one, we'll say, mental error that I don't think is also completely on him at that moment. He was great. So now you're looking at the 5 toughest games Ohio State has played in. Like you said, he's been in complete command. He's never felt overwhelmed. He has answers. He's always efficient, does not turn the ball over. And if he's not scoring touchdowns himself, he's putting the offense in a position to score as well. Tripp, I've said this a lot. I did not think he was an upgrade over Kyle McCord when they got him the transfer portal. I thought we'd see a lot of the same things where he could have success against Iowa or Maryland. But in those big games, right, when you need a drive, similar for Ohio State last year against Michigan, Kyle McCord couldn't come through, couldn't elevate the offense. I thought we see a lot of the same here for Will Howard, and I've been dead wrong. And this was just the latest example of it. In a big game when you need your quarterback to play well, again, outside of Michigan, Howard has answered the bell every single time.
And while all this attention is going on the Ohio State offense, and rightfully so, when you explode like that, they completely stopped Oregon until the final drive of that opening half. And Oregon had to change and abandon its game plan, because when you're staring up at a 14-17, as that hole continued, 24-0 hole, the way that it continued to grow for the Ducks yesterday. But why was Ohio State able on both sides of the football to dominate the football game? To me, the best players for Ohio State were Ty Hamilton, Tyleik Williams, and what they had in the middle of that defensive line. If you look, we talked about on the preview podcast, what makes Oregon's offense really, really good? It's their linemen's ability to protect Gabriel, but also they push out. And how many times did Gabriel have the inability to use the middle of his pocket to get, and they run all of those crossing, everything's kind of across the middle, and they give him a clear sight line there. And yes, Sawyer and JTT were getting pressure off the edges, but a lot of that pressure came after there was already pressure up the middle of the defense from Ohio State, coming up that defensive front from the defensive tackle positions. And there's some stats for those guys to back it up, right? But a lot of that then forced Gabriel to step to his left, his right, try to climb pocket, to elude going around the end. And that's where Sawyer and JTT were able to capitalize on it. But those guys in the middle, Williams, Hamilton, Kanu, they were the reason that Ohio State's defense was so good in this game. And it could be any unit for Ohio State's defense. Like we've talked about it time and time again, how their DBs some days may be the best in college football. Their linebackers some days maybe the best in college football. But to get your defensive tackles playing at that elite level against Oregon, I really think that was the tone setter for them on the defensive side. And then that to complement what they were doing on offense, just put Oregon in an insurmountable hole.
And to highlight your point about the pressure at the middle, which was a great observation going into, this game. And again, that's why you should check out Still Enrolled podcast. Great points there by Brian Tripp. We call him the what was it? Now I forget, what do we call you? Not the common sense, the real
voice of reason.
Voice of reason. Holy hell. Thank you. See, I try to block it out of my mind with how much we've heard it.
How are you feeling?
Oh, not great. We are not to compare ourselves to football players, but every time at this time of the year, everyone's playing hurt. In podcasting terms, we're playing hurt here.
So when did it start for you? Because we obviously heard you hacking on the preview podcast.
Yes. Yeah. The cough started for me. Today's Thursday. Cough started for me about Sunday. So we're going on a week. I think it's gotten a little bit better.
Yeah. This is about like the first couple of days are okay. Then you hit the peaks like 2 or 3 days in. So that was probably when we recorded. But you sound better today. But I have to say, there is nothing. Maybe it's the industry we work in. Maybe we're soft. There's nothing I hate more than being sick and having it. And it's not like a stomach bug. Okay, you're sick for 24 hours. It really sucks. But to have a cold and you feel the cold coming on and you just know what the next week and a half have in store for you. And there is literally nothing you can do about it. There is nothing worse than feeling sick, or even the ominous feeling of, oh no, I'm getting sick. Those are the worst feelings that you could have.
No, you're right. And the best thing is what? Rest. And for you, I give you a lot of credit here, Tripp.
Knock on wood here, because you never know. I was on a plane with 357 people, and a lot of them college students, because I was on the Band and Spirit plane. And when you get all that air circulating, who knows what you're breathing in? But knock on wood, I'm not sick right now. I just have, the dry air and the traveling catches up to you. I'll be honest, I struggled getting out of bed this morning. And I was excited to watch the game. And obviously what happened, I'm not trying to make light of what happened in New Orleans, but I was excited to watch the game last night. But the fact that I didn't have to stay up and watch it last night was also a bit of a reprieve for me, so I could get in bed. I threw on Squid Game for about 30 minutes, and then I fell asleep. So I wasn't able to finish the episode that I was watching.
Nothing says like a sleepy way to go to bed fast and put on Squid Game, watching people just get executed right in front of you on Netflix. Jeez. Pick a worse. That's one of the worst things you can put on as you're trying to fall asleep. Yeah, it's 10 o'clock and I'm in bed. Let's just put on a light watch. Oh, here's Squid Game. Boom. Red light, green light.
I was watching it on the plane home from Arizona yesterday. I'm like, should I be watching this right now? But I had an open seat next. If I didn't have an open seat next to me, I was in the aisle, so I don't know. The poor girl sitting to my left. And then Steve Jones, the voice of the Nittany Lions, was behind me. So I don't know if he was like, well, what is he watching? What is he doing? But it made the flight only a 3-hour and 25-minute flight from Phoenix Sky Harbor to Harrisburg. 3 hours, 25 minutes. I thought we were in time travel mode. It was incredible to get across the country. That fast got back. The team got back yesterday around 5. And we got back after hopping on the bus around 5 as well. It's not bad. I was home to watch most of what was the outstanding. I had so much expectation going into this Rose Bowl game that it was going to be an instant classic. Oregon, number 1 team in the country all year long, most consistent team, the team we picked, but very narrowly picked to win the football game. And Ohio State, probably the second best team in college. This really felt like, okay, this is going to feel like a national championship game. And Ohio State, for the reasons we've talked about, just put it away. like you could make an argument. Okay, Oregon scored before half. If they score coming out of half, then they get a stop. Like you could see, oh, at least they're back within 3 scores. Oh, they've gotten it to 20. They got to 18. What's going to happen? But in all actuality, when it's 34-0, the game is over.
Ironically enough, like you said, this is probably of the first 2 rounds, easily the most anticipated game of the college football playoff.
Mm-hmm.
And it was by far the biggest laugher and the biggest blowout, of course, with blowouts kind of everyone's talking about how non-competitive these games are. But now we'll finally get one. We didn't. And also just to go back to what we were talking about before, and sidetracked by my brain fog here, to your point about the pressure at the middle, what do you hear Chris Fowler say that we haven't heard a lot when talking about Oregon's offense this year? Passes deflected. Did a great job at, again, limiting the window, smaller quarterback, that even when Gabriel was able to sit in the pocket and fire passes, a lot of them are getting knocked down. That defense, Tripp, 8 sacks. This was a defense that got 0 pressure and 0 sacks on Gabriel in the first matchup. 8 sacks, and what is it, 13, I think it is? Just give it 13 tackles for loss. Yeah. That front four for Ohio State, I mean, they single-handedly won the game right there. That was one of the most dominant efforts I've seen this season.
When you're in a hole like that, Kermit, all you have to do is pin your ears back and you can just attack the quarterback and get after them. It just completely changes it. Take it from the Oregon perspective. What happened? Right? What happened?
What happened?
Do you think it was rest?
I think it was part of it. Well, I think you can't deny that. When you watch how well Ohio State's clicking, and you see you have a 25-day layoff between the Big Ten title game and January 1st, you can't, I think it's ignorant to just say, oh, it had nothing to do with it. Of course there's something to do with it. Like Tripp, you're on the team, right? So you're on coaches, you're on players. Everything once training camp starts is about what? Routine, keeping everything the same. And so for 17 weeks, basically from January until December, right? You're on the same routine. Maybe get a bye week here and there, but that's 1 week off. But it's, you play the game on Saturday, you rest, recover Sunday, practice, and all of a sudden you're back at practice, focusing on the next opponent on Monday. And you're in that routine week in and week in and week in. Well, now all of a sudden, you play the Big Ten title game if you're Oregon. You have 3 weeks off plus. I think it's just, for any coach, it's so hard to be able to try to keep the competitive juices going, the focus going, to be able to be sharp to where you come out right away and still can match the energy of Ohio State, who played 10 days ago, who's playing their best football right now, who's in a routine. Like, it's no coincidence. All of a sudden you blink and it's 7-0, 14-0, 17-0, 24-0. Like, Ohio State offensively and defensively clearly benefited from playing 10 days ago. Or had momentum, we're clicking, we're not worrying about getting the rust off, where Ohio State's offensive line especially, you saw early on, they were like on skates, trying to slow down this pass rush, trying to get, I'm sure they're not practicing heavily or with a lot of contact often. So you're trying to play your way essentially into game shape, and you're doing that in the biggest game of the season against a team you could argue is the most talented team in the country. That's a recipe for disaster. It's not the reason why they lost. It's not reason A, B, or C, but is it on the list of reasons why they lost? I think absolutely.
No, I completely agree with you. And look, Oregon goes 13-0 during the regular season. They win the Big Ten championship. This is still an incredibly successful season for Oregon. They still, though, can't get that elusive national championship. So this is still, in this college football playoff era, we're going to judge teams based on, do they win a national championship? Do they make it to the national championship game? And you have a chance. Ohio State this year, because of a 12-team expanded playoff, you now have an opportunity to rewrite the narrative of your season based on 4 weeks from late December to mid-January. You can rewrite the narrative of your season. This should not be an indictment on Oregon's season. It should not be an indictment on their season. They went 13-0 and were the number 1 team basically all year and won the Big Ten championship. An outstanding season. That said, for the team that is the number 1 team in the country throughout the year, and I know there's going to be so much discourse and discussion about the actual format of the 12-team playoff. For that team to not even make it to the college football playoff semifinals, and I think it's a really unique situation, right? they laid an egg and were flat, probably against any other team in the country than this Ohio State wagon right now. There's discussion about, oh my God, what happened to Oregon? But because of who they played, and I think the respect that Ohio State's roster has, you're not having that conversation. But this just proves that they need to fix the format of this 12-team playoff, because for really the only team in the country, Oregon in any other year is unquestionably either in a 4-team playoff as the number 1 seed or in the national championship game. And this year, they don't even make it out of the quarterfinal. So they were really hurt by the new format this season, and it takes away from what they accomplished during the regular season and their conference championship game.
I agree the format has to change, but I think also if you're Oregon, I think it's a little like, I think even with the format the way it is, I don't think the format can be totally to blame, because think about it. If Ohio State, as 3 touchdown favorites, just beats Michigan, regardless of what happens in the Big Ten title game, you're sitting there where you are meeting, if you're Oregon, you're not going to see Ohio State again in the bracket till probably the national title game, right? Because if Ohio State just beats Michigan, no matter what happens in the Big Ten title game, the loser of that game is the 5 seed, right? Maybe the 6. So you're not facing Ohio State if you're Oregon and vice versa until the very end. They got, I don't want to say got screwed, but they got the unlucky situation of Ohio State losing to Michigan, knocking them out of the Big Ten title game. And now they're put down in a spot lower than they should be. Like if they just beat Michigan, they're not facing them right now. And like the format is to blame for sure. But also, like, let's also acknowledge Ohio State, as the most talented team in the country, was at the 8th seed, in part because they lost 2 games in the regular season. You know, they lost a game they shouldn't against Michigan as 3 touchdown favorites. You can't blame the committee for that or the format for that.
But they beat Indiana undefeated and undefeated Penn State. So in actual, and if you look at rankings and not seeds, they would have been ranked above Boise State and Arizona State, which would mean that this game, let's say, should have been the top seed Oregon against the 8 seed Boise State. Because, and look, we're both Penn State alums. And you still have to go out and win the games. But for Penn State to have played SMU and dominated them, tighter game against Boise State, but final score still pretty lopsided at the end, 31-14. What you should have is Oregon, Georgia, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, then your Boise's, Arizona State's, all after that. I don't mind the 12-team field, but how the 12-team field was seeded is a huge detriment to Oregon in this case to have to play Ohio State. And it took away from the first round, because the first round, you could have easily had some great games of, say, Arizona State, who gave Texas all it could handle yesterday, an instant classic in the Peach Bowl. Unbelievable game. What a game by Scadaboo. Bring him back. Running, throwing, catching the football. An outstanding performance. He ends up being the MVP in a losing effort, and deservedly so. But this 12-team format is built to give a team like a Boise, like an Arizona State, the opportunity to win themselves, to prove themselves through victories that they belong. And Arizona State had a chance to do that and almost did it yesterday against Texas. Boise State started to come back against Penn State and almost did it.
Yep.
So this is who that format's for. This format isn't for Ohio State to steal a game then against the number 1 seed in the quarterfinal. And credit Dan Lanning after the game, did not point fingers at the system, did not blame the seeding, did not blame the rest. That's what you expect from him. He's one of the best coaches in college football. But Ohio State should not have been their opening game. They should have been playing whoever that were. They should have been playing Arizona State. They should have been playing Boise State. Hell, it could have been playing Penn State. Yeah. They shouldn't have been playing. They shouldn't have been. It's just, it was tough. It's a tough
No,
spot
you're
for me.
right. I think both could be true here. Number one, the format I think will change going forward because you're right. How the bye system works is clearly flawed. I think, again, it sounded good in principle. Now you're seeing in reality, okay, let's make some changes. I think they will.
Well,
Fair
I think
to
it
say,
sounded good. I think it sounded good when there were 5 power conferences. Now there's 4 power conferences in a
True.
group of 5.
Very true. That's also fair. Yes, you're
Because
right.
Texas would have won the Big 12.
Right.
And Oregon would have won the Pac-12. And no one's
Right.
sitting here complaining if the four teams with byes are, let's just say, Penn State, Georgia, Texas, and Oregon. No one's complaining.
Nope,
That's
you're right.
what it would be in last season, or it's Penn State or Ohio State, right?
Right.
No one's complaining when you have 4 conferences with elite teams. But now for a Big 12, and credit Arizona State, they played unbelievable in that game. And it's not that the Big 12 is bad. It's not that the ACC is bad. But you start to look at bowl game records this year. I mean, ACC, what, 1-9? Was 1-9 in bowl games? At least last time I checked. The Big 10 and the SEC are just better.
No, they are. Especially at the top, right? There's no, I'm not arguing that at all. So I think the format's going to change. But I think what can't be lost here as well, Oregon, you could say, yeah, got screwed with playing Ohio State. There's still, you can't, there's no excusing away how they lost. Yes, you're playing the best team you could argue in the country right now. There's still no excuse for Oregon to be down 34-0 Tripp before halftime. Like, you got to come out and play better. And I think that's where if you're Oregon, like that, you could argue about the format still. But yeah, even though Ohio State's a better team than anyone's played so far this season, you got to match that. And they did not whatsoever. I think that's the most disappointing part is in a season that's been filled with chaos, right? Upsets everywhere, and really no team being consistent outside of Oregon. They chose to have their worst game of the year in the biggest moment. And that's why it's like disappointing, because I really thought this field was up for the taking. If they could get past Ohio State, I don't think Texas, especially offensively, can match what Oregon could put up. Penn State, Notre Dame, Georgia, I think they're the favorites. Oregon is I think for me, they had the national title right there. And to, again, lose to Ohio State, they were favored. It's not a shock, right?
Yep.
But to lose to not even be competitive in this game after being the mark of consistency all season long, forget the format or whatever. You just got to play better. And that was, I think, if you're just inexcusable with how and disappointing and frustrating if you're an Oregon fan watching. Not that if you lost to Ohio State in double overtime, let's say the way Texas barely beat Arizona State, 34-31, 38-35, instant classic.
Whatever. Yep.
You can then, I think, throw your hands above, the format screwed us. We just played this great game and we just happen to be, playing a team that's maybe the only team better than us. But I just think any talk of the format screwing you goes out the window when you look up at the scoreboard and it's 34-0. Because for how great Ohio State is, they are not 34 points better than Oregon. That's for sure. That's for sure. That's really quickly here, just to circle back to Ohio State really fast here, Tripp, because I think we can't end this conversation without mentioning one name, Jeremiah Smith. And we could talk about the offensive line, the defense, the play calling, etc. It's no coincidence. When you get this guy the ball, good things happen. We talked about it in the preview pod. It was criminal. The fact that he's had one game this year with 7 or more receptions. And to credit Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, they made a concerted effort, especially early, to get he's the best player on the field. With all the talent Ohio State has, Jeremiah Smith, as a true freshman, is the best player on the field anytime he's out there. 7 catches, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's open. He's covered, double covered. Doesn't matter. They got on the ball early, and they also did that against Tennessee as well. He has almost 300 yards and 4 touchdowns in 2 playoff games, Tripp. Again, if they continue to get him the ball at the rate they're doing it so far in these 2 playoff games, good luck. There's no defense, no defensive back, even with how good Texas is, how good Notre Dame is, how good Penn State is, how good Georgia. There's no one out there that's covering this guy.
I thought you were going to say Ryan Day, because did you see Desmond Howard's comments? He said this will be the biggest failure in his tenure as a head coach at Ohio State if Ohio State doesn't win the college football playoff national championship. The expectations and moving bar on this guy are unbelievably unfair. What more? And I get it. The way they're playing, they are the favorites right now to win the national championship. They are hands down the favorite to win the national championship. But this moving bar and the expectations on this guy to call it a failure are unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I would say disappointment. I think failure, I'm with you, is too, just with how well they're playing. I just don't know who's.
And here's what we talked about. The benefit of a bye, certainly in question after the results of the first 3 quarterfinal games. And we will see what plays out when Notre Dame and Georgia play later this afternoon. But still, to have to win 4 games versus 3, and if Ohio State to do it on essentially consecutive weeks, I know you get a little additional rest, but to do it against Tennessee, to do it against Oregon, to do it then against Texas, and then to do it against Penn State, Georgia, or Notre Dame, believe me, great, historic, amazing, legendary teams can win 4 games in a row against that 4. But just based on chance and odds and circumstance, to play 4 top 8 teams and to expect to win, and if you can't beat those four teams, that's unreasonable, because a 75% winning percent, a 50% winning percentage against teams in the top 5, top 8, top 10, that's pretty damn good if you're a head coach.
Look, we've both been on it. We have defended Ryan Day. I think the calls for him to get fired were moronic, and now you're seeing that. There better be a lot of Ohio State fans eating crow and sending apologies towards Ryan Day right now after what they said after the Michigan game, because we talked about it. He has a Michigan problem, but losing to Michigan does not prevent you from winning a national title like it did for a large part of this rivalry.
And now you look at what,
right. And so you look at what Day can do. He's 4-1 now against top 10 opponents this season. Ohio State's had the hardest path so far of teams playing on opening weekend to get to the Final Four. He's not only gotten there, he's throttled teams to the combined score of 83-38. He just avenged the loss to Oregon in dominating fashion. You look at how he beats everybody not named Michigan in both the Big Ten and non-conference. In the playoff games he's lost, he's been competitive to where they lost a great game against Clemson in 2019, got revenge against them the next year. Sure, they got blown out by Alabama in 2020 national title game, but Alabama's blowing everybody out. You were a field goal away from beating Georgia in a year that no one thought Georgia was going to lose. They ended up didn't lose and go 15-0 that year, and you probably beat TCU, win a national title. Now you just throttle, and you didn't beat. You destroyed the best team in the country on a neutral field. You have all this confidence in the world. You're the favorite right now to win the national title. He's the second best coach in college football right now, Tripp. I don't think there's really an argument about it. He's behind, I think, only Kirby Smart, in the sense of when you look at his resume, look at how his teams are playing right now, like people want to call for his job. And the question, especially you always ask, is who are you going to hire him with? You want to fire the second best coach in college football? Be my guest. Do I think everybody in the country a favor. If you're an Ohio State fan still upset about Ryan Day, you can't be Michigan. That's a problem in and of itself. But right now, when you look at also, can we give him credit too, Tripp? Because he could have went into a hole. He could have went into a shell. He could have just never recovered. Like we've seen coaches and players do when you lose a game of that magnitude to Michigan. And his credit in those 2 weeks they had off between Michigan and Tennessee, he has gotten his guys focused, ready to play, believing, inspired. They are playing the best football they have all year. Should they have been playing it a little bit early in the season? Probably. But now, late in the year is when you want to be playing your best football. There's no doubt about it. They're playing their best football, and to do that after what should have been a seismic loss that maybe could have changed and altered the history of Ohio State football moving forward, to do it after that, just even more kudos towards Ryan Day. Again, the criticism towards him is ridiculous. But can you name me one coach right now other than Kirby Smart that you would rather that's a better coach in the country than Ryan Day? I don't think there is one.
Before the game, and I don't think we're at this point with the narrative yet, but before the game, everyone would have said Dan Lanning. And it's crazy how quickly things can change. And if there's kind of this trend starting now for Dan Lanning in big games, their defense, if you look at the points they've allowed in their 3 biggest games this year against Ohio State twice, and he's a defensive coach, Ohio State twice and Penn State. Their 2 biggest games last year, the Washington games. And then you go back the year before, his first year as head coach, the Washington and Georgia games, they've allowed 30-plus points defensively and sometimes 40-plus points defensively in all of those games. So that's the question for Oregon is, where's your defense in the biggest games? Yeah, you can beat up on good teams and you get them playing from behind because your offense is so good. And now that Now that story has changed. Speaking of coaches, you do realize we are one win away. We are one win away from an Ohio State versus Penn State, James Franklin versus Ryan Day national championship game. And Penn State now has beaten back-to-back. I get it. SMU and Boise State, but they've beaten back-to-back top 10 teams, and they have absolutely just taken care of business. As expected and as they were supposed to do when that bracket came out to get to the national semifinals. And Penn State is in the Final Four for the first time in this college football playoff era with a 31-14 win against Boise State. I was there on the sideline. I have some interesting observations, I think, from observing the game at field level. What were your takeaways from watching it? What did you do on New Year's Eve? How did you watch the game?
Well, we went to one of my friend's apartments. So it was a low-key New Year's Eve. No, I was actually taking it because there was dinner being thrown out there. And I said, oh, please, dinner's like the worst case scenario because you're going to go to a restaurant that has no TVs, right? It's one of those New Year's specials where it's a fancy dinner. It's a black room. I said, I can't be watching this game on my phone and keeping it together. So
here's my thing, though. Like for a game of this magnitude, playoff quarterfinal, Fiesta Bowl, I don't like to watch it in the company of others or apart. Like, yeah, I can watch if everyone's invested in the game, but I'm not sitting there and having conversations about, oh, did you listen to Sabrina Carpenter's new track? Oh, what did you think about the dinner party we had the other night? No, if you're not invested and locked in and watching college football and watching because you care about the game, I don't need fake fans hiding around me trying to. To me, I actually think a party could be a bad scenario too.
This is where I'll give my friends a lot of credit, and why they deal with me and still be friends with me, I don't know. But I basically told my girlfriend, look, I'm not going anywhere where the game's not going to be on and it's not the central focus. And she said, okay. And to our friends' credit, none of them are Penn State fans, but they said, come over. The game is on. No one was ever thinking about putting on, Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve. We put that on long after the RIP. The game was over. So, and my friends have been there for a lot of low points. I've convinced them many times that Penn State, this is the year they're going to beat Ohio State. And they've watched it with me and they've suffered the lows. So, number one, my friends know the importance. They know the meaning, thankfully. And they were all on board with the TV's on. Now, also there was a little bit of music in the background, but again, I will let some things go there. It was the main game. No one really talked to me, or at least, again, people. So I actually had a decent viewing experience for the most part here, thankfully.
Were you front and center?
Yes. Oh, yes. And
when you watch a game, are they watching the game or are they watching what's more of the show, the game or you? Are you when your team is playing, are you one of those people that some people have said, and I'm not going to name names, although the list is really long, that if they're watching an Eagles game with me, they come to watch me and not just the game?
At this point, my friends know the deal. So a lot of them know what to expect. So it's like almost like the novelty is gone. But I didn't sit down one time. Like, I'm a big stander. Especially with nerves, I like to stand. I like to walk around. I can't be sitting down on the couch. Even at the game, I was pumped up. We went to the SMU game. Everyone in our section stood. I can't sit for a big game. So standing kind of like on an angle to the TV, pacing a little bit. It was a good setup. It was all things considered for that game on New Year's Eve, which kind of got to make some sacrifices with a girlfriend. It was a win.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Penn State's up 14-0 fast.
Yep.
How much did you have to stand during the game?
A good amount, because again, I was confident going in, but it's still like, okay, the last thing I think you want is to let go of the rope and all of a sudden the team's coming back, and then Boise State's 14-7 and it's 17-14. So while they were in control and never felt like they were going to lose, it was also close enough where okay, you got to get a little bit intrigued, can't really turn away, can't sit down. So it was 3.5 hours of standing, which again, I will take here. To your question, because I really want to hear what you have to say and what you saw, but I'm just, at least to maybe kick us off this way. For when I saw on the TV, 3,000 miles away was this.
Yeah.
I thought Penn State's offensive line and defensive line clearly won the game, right? Dominated the game.
Yeah.
But like even like bigger than that, Tripp, I feel like this is the best offensive and defensive lines James Franklin has had at the same time in his tenure at Penn State. With how right now they're able to run the ball consistently, able to run the ball different ways with Singleton and Allen, how they're able to, I know it's, look, you can roll your eyes at SMU and Boise State and who they play, and so the stats may be a little bit inflated. But statistically, at least, both teams were top 15 in terms of rush defense. And for Penn State to have their way on the ground and then defensively, with no Abdul Carter for most of the game, to have their way and limit right now the best running back in college football who has never had that bad of a game at any point this season, even playing Oregon. You look at this defensive, you look at the trenches for Penn State. They've never been better, I think, under James Franklin. And it's a real, we've said this before, right? I thought to this point Penn State was not a national title contender. I didn't think they could win. When you see how well the trenches are playing,
yep.
I think I'm wrong about that. I think they can absolutely win a national title.
I think if Abdul Carter is healthy and available to play in the national semifinal, I'd be very surprised if Penn State did not beat either Georgia or Notre Dame to advance to the national championship for the reasons that you just stated. I think they have been so good on the offensive and defensive lines. And to lose Anthony Donko and have Nolan Rucci play the way that he has at tackle, for Nick Dawkins to come in at center and elevate his game even further this season, I think like there's certain parts of this game that we can certainly nitpick. And I'm sure we will here in the next 10 to 15 minutes of the podcast. But ultimately, I think you hit the nail on the head with what they were able to do on the offensive line to run the ball with Allen at 7.9 yards per carry. And then for Singleton just to stick with it and finally end the game with a 58-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter. And his average ends at 7.2 yards per carry. I know Aller was sacked 4 times, but that was against the blitz. And as we nitpick this, right, we're going to talk about why did Penn State not stick with the running game in obvious run situation. I know you wanted to take some shots against a Boise State secondary that we saw in that first quarter on the deep ball to Amari Evans is susceptible to deep passing plays. But when you have such a hot hand in Katron Allen on a third, this was not the time to get cute because you were dominating the line of scrimmage. You were dominating the line of scrimmage on the offensive side. And then on the defensive side, like I've seen a lot of tweets. Oh, Ashton Jeanty ran for 104, 105 yards in the football game. Ashton Jeanty carried it 30 times. He did not score a touchdown. They did. Tom Allen. Everyone has talked about the hire of Andy Kotelnicki, and rightfully so. It has ignited life into a Penn State offense. But what Tom Allen has done on the defensive side for Penn State to, I would say, maybe even elevate a Manny Diaz defense from last year, to hold Jeanty to 3.5 yards per carry, 39 yards in the first half. A lot of those yards at the end, like they kept him in to run for the record. And some of it was stat padding at the end. No touchdowns, 2 forced fumbles against the guy. I think I saw he still had 16 forced missed tackles in the game. And comparatively, Nicholas Singleton has 29 on the season. So Jeanty's really good. And I'm not taking away from Ashton Jeanty. But to essentially render him meaningless in this game, he had a 22-yard run and a 26-yard run. Outside of that, he didn't do anything. And they were in 3rd and longs. And Mattson, I know he threw 3 interceptions. Really, it was the Boise State passing game that kept them in it with some plays through the air. Credit to them. It was the short, quick passes, then sneak the tight end out. You know, he made some good plays to keep him in the game. I think if you told me going in that Maddox Madsen would throw for 304 yards, you'd probably be a little worried about that. But what they did, as you mentioned, without Abdul Carter for 66, like 2/3 of the game, that's unbelievable. And it wasn't just Durant. It wasn't just Jay Thomas or Deni Dennis Sutton, who was so good. Carter was really good when he was healthy too. But to get a guy like Josiah Izzard to step up again, Amin Vanover, Max Granville played some snaps. To get those guys, Vanover had 6 tackles, a sack, and 2 tackles for loss. Amin Vanover, Smith Vilbert, They're deep. And to your point, that's the difference with this James Franklin team. They're deep on the offensive line. They're deep on the defensive line. And for you to lose your starting tackle in Donko in the last month of the regular season, and then to lose an All-American defensive player and still shut down Boise State, credit to them and credit for what they've built in the trenches. That's why they're so good right now.
Speaking of Abdul Carter, right? That's obviously going to be the big question between as we're recording this on Thursday morning and next week.
I got it. You want an update?
Do you have an update? Do you have any idea?
There is no.
Because I'll say ESPN did not do a good job at all. And I'm not sure if that's just them or Franklin, who's always been very concealed about injuries. So, do you know anything?
Penn State. Okay, here's the deal. Penn State does not release official injury updates. I'll say, because I think everyone could see it at home. There are certainly times where us on the Penn State radio broadcast team have information on availability, injuries, and know what it is when other people may not. But because this is a game in which an audience is in the stands, there's cameras on the field, ESPN certainly covered it at some point because I saw Tom Luganville running around down there trying to get an update. It's actually interesting. And I think Tom's great. I really think he's really good as an analyst and as a sideline reporter. But early third quarter, at this point, Carter had gone into the tent, and you could see that he was favoring his left arm, right? I think everyone knows he was favoring his left arm. You look at the trophy ceremony after the game. He's holding the trophy up only his right arm. He's really not moving his left arm. I don't think that's out of line for me to say because of my access. So Luganville, early third quarter, is going up and down. Well, what's the injury? We need to confirm. Is he in or is he out? Is he in or is he out? And at this point, Carter had gone into the tent, came back out. He went in for one play.
Yep.
Played the one play, came out of the game, and never went back in. So to start the third quarter, he's no longer holding his helmet. He's not wearing his helmet. He has a towel draped over his head on the sideline, and he's holding his left arm kind of to his body on the side. Still smiling, still engaged, still leading the team, still active. But to ask for a team which doesn't give injury information out, what more do you want as a reporter than you can walk up and down the sideline, see Abdul Carter is standing there with a towel over his head. He doesn't have his helmet, and he's not really moving his left arm. That's your report. That's what we said on the radio. Abdul Carter is down here. He has a towel over his head. He's really favoring his left arm. He does not appear to be returning to tonight's game. What kind of confirmation? Open your eyes. What kind of confirmation do you need? He's not going back in. He's not going back in. I will say, because we can continue on that, and I'll get to your question. But everyone wants to know, okay, is he going to play against Notre Dame or Georgia? Carter was in really good spirits down there.
He was.
And Franklin said after the game, he's going to do everything in his power to play. I don't think, and this is just complete speculation for me seeing everything that every reporter, fan, anyone else can see. Complete speculation. I don't think it's a long-term injury. He seemed in good spirits, overheard some conversations with his teammates. I think he has a chance to play. Yes, I think he has a chance to play in the Orange Bowl. That's as much as I have. That's as much as I know. And that's really me seeing nothing else that probably anyone else at home or in the stands could see.
What gives me optimism is that I'm not sure if you saw this, but just before we started recording this podcast, he did go on social media and he posted nothing else but this photo. You can see right here if you're watching on YouTube. And it is apparently, because I'm not very well versed in movies.
Are you reading Connor Griffin's tweet? Connor Griffin
I am.
From Barstool. Yeah. Friend of the pod, friend of the show.
We both know Connor. We love Connor.
We love Connor.
This is what? Great. Star Wars. I believe this is Darth Vader in like a chamber basically that helps him get healthy essentially quicker. Yep. Again, just to continue the speculation, I'm assuming you're not posting that if you're Abdul Carter if you know you have no chance of playing or if your season is over. That's all I can, I'm just going to assume that, right? I'm assuming that I hope, but But again, I don't think you post that on social media with everyone now questioning between now and next Thursday. Will you play? Are you healthy? What's the deal? I don't think you post that if you know for a fact already, I'm out, I'm toast, I can't play.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I'm curious, because just because I feel like as fans we watch, we don't really know the process. Could you take us behind the scenes, Tripp, of like you said, Luka Bill's running around looking for confirmation. Like, what is that process like when you talk about confirmation? Is it James Franklin? Is it a spokesman? Is it a trainer?
Yeah.
Like when that happens, like what happens?
Yep. Yeah, it's a spokesperson. You're looking for
Okay.
one of the team's sports information contacts. NFL, they're required to do it and provide an official update. College, they're not.
Right.
Oftentimes, those reports in the NFL sideline reporters, the team will issue its official injury designation on a player who goes out, and the sideline reporter just gets that official designation from the team and reports it. It's the same deal here. But in college, you're not required to do it. Penn State doesn't release any information. They don't release a questionable, probable out designation. So if you're a reporter, you're on the sideline, just use observations and not speculate on status. But I think it's pretty easy to say, hey, here's where he is. Doesn't look promising. You don't have to officially declare out, questionable, day-to-day, probable. But yeah, that would come from a spokesperson. And in college, you're not even in the playoff mandated to give an availability report before the game like you are during the regular season.
Interesting. And are you and Luka Bill, are you guys working together? Are you rivals? How does that work? Is he coming to you hey, have you heard any confirmation? Are you going to him?
Occasionally the TV sideline reporters will ask, just knowing that and often those PR people aren't down on the field. So they'll see someone who's with Penn State, working with Penn State. They'll see them down there and ask, hey, have you heard anything? It's funny, actually, I was standing there on the sideline and Joe Hermit, who's an excellent photographer from Penn Live and takes a ton of pictures, been around a real long time. He asks me, fourth quarter, he's taking a couple of pictures of Carter, and he turns and goes, do you know what's wrong with Carter? And I replied, yes. And that was it.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah, I'm not telling you. So, I have a really good relationship with Jenny Taft because she's done so many Penn State games, with Catherine Tappan as well. So, because they have to cover a whole field and they have producers that help them sometimes. But if I see something, I'm not going to give anything away that's going to be detrimental to the team or program or something that's internal to Penn State that I wouldn't share on the radio, because you certainly see some of that. But if I see something to help them, or often I'm not going to the opposing sideline. So say something had happened to one of the key players for Boise State. They may say, hey, I'm not sure if you saw it. Did you see this? Or what did coach tell you going into the locker room in your interview? Just wondering what I should ask him when we come back out. We'll trade that kind of stuff down on the field, but it's just another resource for them. It's kind of a resource for me. And you don't work competitively, but you work together and help each other, because the sidelines can get really crowded. You can miss a lot. There's a lot that you're trying to pay attention to while still also contribute to the broadcast. And they're in a role, your TV sideline reporters often as storytellers. So they'll come into the game and they have those sidebar stories about maybe a player who's involved in charity work or something about his family. And they'll be telling those stories during the game. My role on radio is kind of as an extra set of eyes and ears from field level. We're not telling the Penn State, we're not giving those sidebar stories as frequently on a radio broadcast, because we're around the team. Our fans know the team. We don't have to tell you about Dom DeLuca's walk-on journey, or we don't have to tell you about Nolan Rucci transferring in from Wisconsin and his family ties to Penn State and connect that all back. Our audience knows that already. So really, I'm an extra set of eyes and ears for Steve and Jack on the field. For instance, on the Warren touchdown, the first Warren touchdown to start the scoring for Penn State, Jack said, and he's like, because they're kind of obscured from that corner of the end zone, where he's like, oh, they might have to look at this. Did he get his foot in? Did he hold on? All that. I go, I'm standing right there at the pylon. So I'm telling you, I'm like, yep, he caught it. So I'll do that. Or if body language, or Aller goes over and talks to a lineman, or James, during this game was going up and talking to the officials early about the Boise State defense imitating the snap count. So I hear all those conversations on the field, and then I can contribute, hey, Steven Jack, something to look for down here on the field. James Franklin called the officials over during that last series, and he was frustrated because Boise State's defenders, he's saying, are imitating Penn State's snap count on the offensive side. Those are things that I look to add as the sideline reporter on radio.
Interesting. That's a really cool peek behind the curtains. Like I said, we see it. Obviously, we see the final product, but all the scrambling going on behind the scenes to get the information, or et cetera, I think is fascinating. That's very, very cool, Tripp. All right, so what else? So obviously, we talked about the game. Yeah. From this, what do you see down there? What kind of body language, from your perspective here, outside of obviously the offensive, defensive lines that we saw, what was one of your biggest takeaways from Penn State's win over Boise State here?
Yeah, so I think we hit on the biggest theme of the game, that Penn State was able to dominate in the trenches offensively with their run game that they probably should have stuck with a little bit more, and then dominate defensively and contain Ashton Jeanty. And we said on the preview pod, if you can contain Jeanty, he's still going to rack up yards just because he's going to carry the ball so many times. But to hold him to 3.5 yards per carry, you check that box. And we said also, if Penn State can run the ball, I think I said that it won't be close. And honestly, while it was at points, to still win at 31-14 in a playoff game isn't really all that close in the end. So I think they hit their marks on what you wanted to see. I'll tell you this. If you go up 14-0, the way they did, and Aller made some unbelievable throws early in that football game. The touchdown we just talked about to Warren, the deep ball, the moon ball, he dropped it. I think Bob Wischusen said dropped it down the chimney to Amari Evans. Was an unbelievable ball. And they knew in the game plan that they're going to have that post route available to them. Probably went to the well one too many times after they had shown that they were able to run the ball the way they were. To force the fumble, to be up 14-0, and then a chance to put it away. The first momentum swing was the failed exchange between Aller and Singleton, where if he allows Nick to just take that ball, I think he had a seam, and he may have put it into the end zone and been up 21-0 right there, and the game is over. So that's the first momentum swing. The second is when Carter went down. And I'll tell you, on that Penn State sideline, it's a group that's confident, swagger. You could feel when it got to 14-7 that they were reeling a little bit, and they were starting to get frustrated offensively, right? The blitz started to get home against Aller. Penn State they had 10 penalties in this game. You could feel like, is this going to be another one of those Boise Fiesta Bowls? Was it just because Boise had the rest? Penn State didn't have the rest. They're kind of in rhythm, and they started fast. And I thought the field goal, the points that they got at the end of the half, and I felt like there was an opportunity for 7 there. I thought Aller made a good throw to Harrison Wallace, a good throw to Tyler Warren, and didn't come up with one or two of those. They got a call or two to go their way on that drive as well. But I still thought the 3 points going into the half were critical. Still, though, to start the second half, not have Carter, not do anything with the ball on that first drive, and then all of a sudden, Boise sneaks Lauder out of that blocking formation and wheels him up the side. And I mean, no one's within 20 yards of the guy. And it's at 17-14. The next drive on a third and 11 inside the red zone to throw the touchdown to Warren, a big-time player making a big-time play. I thought that was the game right there. To be able to punch that in and get the touchdown, Warren make the play, 24-14. And after that, Penn State settled back down. But I think there were points because of the fumble, the momentum Boise had, the ability to get pressure on Penn State making uncharacteristic mistakes by taking penalties. I thought that game started to turn. But for them to find a way to snap it back, which ultimately was Warren making a big play on a 3rd and 11 in the back of the end zone, for them to get it to turn back, then you felt good. So really the middle 24 minutes of the game, very uneasy on that Penn State sideline and on the field, certainly.
And I think that highlights, again, the theme that's really been prevalent all season long, and that's their mental toughness. I don't like if this – we've seen so many times in previous years, one bad thing, 2 bad things go against them. All of a sudden, they kind of all melt down. Everything unravels. And all of a sudden,
and Boise State missed 2 field goals in this game. So they had opportunities too.
Right, you're right. They absolutely did. But that's like, it goes back to like their – I think in previous years when they would let go of the rope, and like you said, that middle tier where maybe at 14-7, at 17-14, things could have went the other way, and Boise State could have Boise Stated the Fiesta Bowl and pulled us out. They clamped down. They make plays. And part of the reason why I think Tripp this year is different for Penn State is James Franklin and Andy Kotelnicki, at times questionable play calling for sure on 3rd and short. Maybe let's run the ball. But anyway, I think ever since that Ohio State game, you have seen a more concerted effort to say, you know what? In these big games, we're going to simply get the ball to our best players. Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, Tyler Warren. And in that second half, in that fourth quarter, again, after Boise State takes that 3-point lead, to march right down the field, to find Warren in the end zone, to not ignore him, to then run the, again, for the most part, outside of that 1 3rd down, to run the ball through 2 running backs that are feasting to put the game away. You are now seeing Penn State consistently, which they failed to do for a large part, in previous years, get the ball to their best players when they need them to make plays most. And they're coming through, Tripp. And that mental toughness, again, we've talked about it with the USC comeback, with the Wisconsin second half comeback with Bo Perbula in a quarterback. They have a resiliency that I think has really formed this year compared to others. And it's a big reason why some of these close games, they pull out in the end here. And they, even with things going against them, or like you said, self-inflicted wounds, how many penalties, took back some big plays, they just keep on coming and keep on bouncing back.
And I think you certainly, look, they had an easy draw, but you still have to go and take care of your draw. And they did it in dominating fashion. Lopsided win over SMU. Lopsided win over Boise State. Defense getting tackles for loss, sacks, creating turnovers in both of these games. The ability to run the ball and play defense at the level at which they're playing. And then to have Aller, who, again, like Notre Dame or Georgia's going to blitz Penn State. They're going to have to figure out how to blitz. I think they're going to have to play a cleaner game. They had 10 penalties. They're going to have to make a few more catches. Not get too cute. This was not a perfect Penn State performance, but ultimately they blew out SMU. They won. They covered in this game. 21-14 is pretty lopsided in the end. They took care of business, and now they're 1 win from a national championship. And I think sportsbooks say they would be the underdog against Notre Dame or Georgia. If Carter plays, to me, I think it's Penn State. I think Penn State's the team to beat in that half of the bracket. I think Ohio State's the team to beat in the other half, in the Texas game. And I think you're looking at a potential Penn State-Ohio State national championship game. And that is not a homer opinion. That is honestly just from watching games. I think Penn State's more complete than Georgia and Notre Dame. And they're as physical as anybody. And this feels like a team that absolutely can go to the national championship. And we've already, this is a podcast that's nearly spanned 70 minutes already. But for James Franklin to get them to this point, if you can get one more, I don't think there's any more noise ever. Already, I think they've kind of said, okay, these guys are for real. I think the interview Franklin did on game day yesterday morning with McAfee and company on there was really good. And you can kind of see like the narrative now is shifting. This is a Penn State team that is one of the top 5 programs in college football. The question is just, can they finally get over that hurdle and win against one of these big dogs, blue chip, blue blood programs? And they have 1 or 2 chances to do it at the end of the season. But it's gone from really good season for them to great season. And no matter how it ends, great season. They're at the point now where it could be magical. And I think they have a chance to do it. I really do. I think Ohio State and Penn State are the best 2 teams left. And I would love to see Ohio State, Penn State in the national championship.
I agree. I totally agree. Again, I try to be unbiased here, and I tried to at least tell you when the playoffs started. I don't know if Penn State's on that level of Ohio State, Oregon, Texas through 2 games. I can't disagree. I'm with you 100%. I think those are the 2 best teams left. And no matter who wins, and we'll see again later today, Notre Dame, Georgia, I'm with you. I feel good about Penn State's ability to beat either team here. Last thing I want to say here, Tripp, just about Penn State, is love their ability. Because early in the season, right, what was the big knock on them? They got off to slow starts offensively, defensively, their second half team. And in this game, again, offensively, defensively, to get off to a quick start, 14-0. You highlighted Tom Allen. I'm glad you did. Like with the job he's done. This team has turned the season around in part because now they have corrected one of the big flaws, which was getting in early holes. And again, it wasn't exactly like they get out early and run away with it. But now you're seeing in these games recently that they've done a really good job of coming out strong, not allowing any sort of momentum to build on the other side. and doing a good job of correcting a weakness that, again, when you look at how sloppily they played, and you highlighted, again, a lot of the errors that they committed, a lot self-inflicted that made this game closer than it should have been. But there's optimism to believe, because Penn State's done it all season long, that these errors will be corrected by the time the next time they get on the field. And that's where I think, like you said, part of the confidence comes in against Notre Dame or Georgia, is that these issues we saw, they should not carry over from one week to the next, because Penn State's done a great job, I think, all year long at seeing weaknesses and then almost immediately correcting them and improving them. And I think there's no reason to believe that's going to stop now. Going into next week.
No, I completely agree with you. Completely agree with you. Wow.
Really, I know. Can we say one thing really, really fast here? Number one, boy. Shout out to the Big Ten in bowl season. They have pulled off some upsets. We saw USC with a nice win. Did not think that was going to happen. Illinois with a nice win. How about Michigan? And probably the game we were the most confident in against Alabama. Holy hell.
The Big Ten is 8-4 in bowl games in the college football playoff combined. And the Big Ten against the SEC has USC over Texas A&M, Michigan over Alabama, and Illinois over South Carolina. The only loss, a game Iowa was ahead in and should have won, they lost to Missouri 27-24.
So far, great showing by the Big Ten. Big Ten greater than the SEC. We all knew that, but hey, suck at SEC fans. How about Illinois really fast here? Yep. Actually, Illinois and Michigan. Yeah, Michigan ends their season, right, in what we thought was going to be a forgettable year, rebuilding year, by beating Ohio State on the road, beating Alabama, with a lot of their key players out getting ready for the draft. Does not matter. Illinois gets their first 10-win season since 2001. Brett Bielema is out there trying to instigate a fight against Shane Beamer as that game is winding down. And now all of a sudden you look for Illinois and Michigan with the momentum they get end of the year, with a lot that's returning from Michigan. You get Bryce Underwood here, which should be exciting. We'll see if he plays next year. But Illinois, Luke Altmaier's coming back. They got to replace some receivers, but they have a lot of production returning offensively, defensively. And I love Brett Bielema after the game, Tripp, basically saying, look, this is a great win, a nice, fitting end to the year, but this is just a start. And next year, we're competing for the college football playoff. I think Illinois is in the mix. They got a decent schedule. Some of the hardest games are at home. Ohio State comes to town. I know it's always dangerous to play the schedule game now because no one looked at Indiana this time last year as a tough game. But I think we should, at least expectation-wise, with the production they have coming back, I think we should be talking about one of those teams that should be 12, 13, 14, 15 range in the mix to be making a playoff.
Well, since you took the Illinois perspective, I'll take Michigan here. To end the year and have that momentum, it's a real thing going into the offseason. It's a season that still is below expectation for Michigan. But to beat Ohio State in the fashion they did at the end, to beat Alabama while being 3-score underdogs, and it was sloppy. They created turnovers, but to do it with a freshman running back going for more than 100 yards, to do it without all your best defensive players, to do it without your best offensive players, to do it still without a quarterback, and you think that quarterback answer is coming in. I mean, it has the ball rolling in the right direction. It reinstills confidence in Sharon Moore, and it feels like this is I know it's just two games at the end of the year, and it's still an underwhelming season, and ultimately, is anyone ever going to remember that you beat Alabama in a bowl game in the slop for the most part between two teams? It didn't really mean anything in this 12-team playoff era. But what it could mean for them going forward, man, I think Michigan at the end of the year, we talk about narratives and changing in this 24/7 cycle, 365, you're always looking for something to talk about, but it's a real thing with these recruits and kids and the buzz around your program and social media and the portal window being open and then the portal window closing, then it'll open again in the spring. All of a sudden, don't forget about Michigan. I think it reinstills some confidence, not only in their fans, but those players that believe in Michigan. And it sets them up for a really optimistic summer and optimism going into the fall for them. Wasn't pretty. Pretty. It was ugly. But that's how they won. That's how they win this year. And to beat Ohio State and to beat Alabama. And then the statement it makes about everyone saying, well, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, all these SEC teams, why aren't they in the playoff? Or Tennessee making the playoff and getting demolished by Ohio State? It does not send a good message. The SEC had an opportunity in these bowl games to say, we got snubbed here.
Right.
Instead, it was the Big Ten sending that message. And there are takeaways that you can have for each team. There are takeaways that you can have at a league level. And what are the implications of these results moving forward in a committee when you start evaluating teams, programs? We don't live in a vacuum. There is some significance to it in perception of conferences. And it's a good thing for the Big Ten. It's a good thing for the Big Ten.
Helps the benefit of the doubt, right? If next year, instead of it's SMU, Alabama, it's Illinois, South Carolina, you're not going to look back at the Cheez-It Bowl and say, oh, put Illinois in. But to your point, the perception of Big Ten, tough conference, better strength of schedule, I'm with you. I think it helps. Is it a huge factor? No, but it absolutely helps you going forward for those programs ending the year and carrying it over to 2025, but also helps the overall health of the conference there as well. So nice fitting end. What a bowl season so far for the Big Ten. That, like you said, we're 2 wins away
Far from over.
seeing a Big Ten national championship game.
And in the first year of the Still Enrolled podcast, wouldn't that be fitting?
That would be you're 100% right. Wow, look at that. We created it, and all of a sudden the Big Ten is here to stay. What a podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in again. Make sure you tell your friends, subscribe, Still Enrolled, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube as well. It's Thursday. So enjoy the weekend. I know it's easy to forget. It's not Monday. It is Thursday. Enjoy the weekend. We'll be back next week. Get you set for 2 playoff games here when we do return on the Still Enrolled podcast.